Farrokh, you've been the director of Aga Khan Award for Architecture for 16 years, but I understand you've been at the Aga Khan Development Network for almost 40 years, is it? I'd love to hear a bit about the sort of history of your time here.
So I joined here for only a 5 months contract when I was 30, and that was 40 years ago, exactly June 1982. And I was, because I'm Iranian, I was there for just a short period of time in Europe, and I came here. And that 5 months turned out to be 40 years. So it's been a long time, I would say. I've witnessed the development of the system. I was there when it was the Silver Jubilee. That I know that from the timing there.
Amazing, amazing. And when I get home today, Farrokh, my 5-year-old is going to be asking me who I met. So if we think about your role today, I would love your help in how I should explain to her your role and the Aga Khan Award for Architecture.
I'm always very interested in what's His Highness's vision. Mm-hmm. And one of the things especially which is known, because there are two sides of His Highness, is he's the Imam for the Murids, but at the same time he is a very important person of our history. And he had a vision, and he chose, after many years, after 25 years of his, the first years of his imamate, he chose how he can have influence above and another level. And he chose culture, and not only culture, he chose architecture. Mm-hmm. And that was a really visionary, because architecture is one of the very few disciplines that it touches all levels of society.
Absolutely, and we're now, what, 45 years into the award, if I'm right, 15th cycle? Yes. So thinking about that impact that you've talked about, touching lots of different people in their lives, what were the goals of the award when it was first sort of defined or designed?
As far as I've read and I've known, the whole thing of creating the award was the way that His Highness for many years, being someone who's been building for the Jamaat, schools, hospitals, etc., and also doing a lot of other projects, factories, hotels, he was always in contact with the architects, and he had this question, that's what he's been saying it in some of his interviews, the question that what we've come from a history which architecture played such an important role in our culture, why the architecture that we have today is so bad. And that's where the question comes. And he wanted to have that kind of to see, first of all, he was questioning why. And that's why he chose the award for architecture after a number of consultations with a lot of experts. Because this way we can show good examples, and people do learn from good examples. Mm-hmm. The only thing is we have to define the questions and how it is. And I think that's where he had this vision which came through. So what he had in mind, how he can have an impact on other people and not only on Jamaat.
Yeah, because it's interesting if we think about the award for architecture within the sort of frame of AKDN, where the mandate is around improving quality of life for people. And architecture typically you don't think of architecture as being, your typical kind of development priority. You think about health, you think about education. The built environment, architecture doesn't really always feature. So I'm just interested to know, what's the thinking there? Where did that?
Well, this is the whole thing of explaining what architecture is. Yeah. A lot of people do say, if you go to a good hospital, hospital which is built well, the doctors can work better. The patients will be in a much better conditions. If you go to school, the building of your school is adapted and it's not bad, mm-hmm. you learn better. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing is that architecture has a very direct impact. It's not that it's not the development. It's very wrong to think of development without architecture. And at the same time, you cannot, compartmentalize the quality of life. If there's a quality of life which only is going to be the health, and only to be education, and only to be the monetary level, that is not enough. If you don't have the culture, it will not bind all these things together.
And when you talked about one of the things around the award highlighting good practice and sharing and learning from other people's good practice, Could you share some examples of good practice or projects that have spoken to you?
Let me put it in a historic perspective. Today, all the young people, through internet, they think that the world has always been like that you can immediately jump on something and have all the information about it at any moment. 40 years ago, 45 years ago, 50 years ago, that was not the case. You could only learn through either journals and newspapers or the books. And what happened is, the world of those days, someone in Morocco had no idea what's happening in Indonesia. Someone in India didn't know what's in Tunisia or whatever. So one of the main roles of the award was to tell people that someone else on the other part of the world who had the same problem as you has found a solution which was much more maybe intelligent than the ones that you're around, and one you can learn from that. So that was the beginning of the reason of the Aga Khan Award, to put people to know others. Now, how it has an impact? The impact is that when you ask a question, I don't think any architect wants to do a bad project. The only thing is that the client doesn't know how to say what he wants and what rights he have, or she has. So the whole thing is that you have to find this combination of asking for better.
So what I'm hearing is, when we're working with architects, if any of us ever are, we should be pushing them for better.
It's not a matter of pushing them for better. The whole thing is that asking the right question. Because usually, one has dreams when you want to do a project, architect project. And maybe what you have in mind is not exactly what is the best for you as a person. And also the architect, what he has in mind for someone else might not be the best. So what's very important is to create a dialogue, to understand the other person, the other context, and what are the needs, to review it, and then find the best solution for that very specific place and context.
And just building on what you're saying, I'm thinking about members of the Jamaat that might be either in architecture as a field, as a profession, or considering that as a career as they choose where they're headed. Any advice that you have for people looking at architecture as a profession?
Architecture is hard work, like anything else. It is technique, but it's one of the fields that you have to go between, as I said, technique and also creation. Creativity is very important. Whenever they want to work, they have to work hard and understand the context. It doesn't mean that every architect has to go and see in detail the place that he's designing for, because there has been some architects who cannot go. The most important thing is studying and spending time on the project and on the space, and to understand it better.
Thank you. And I mean, if we think about the world today and the challenges with the environment, context of climate change, etc., what can you share in terms of what you've seen through the Award for Architecture in terms of how we're responding to this challenge? If we're responding to this challenge.
Sometimes I've got some problems with those trendy words, because right now, for example, some years ago, sustainability was the buzz. So everybody was looking for sustainable architecture. Then now everybody's talking about climate, and all these are true. Every single project has to respond to all of these. You cannot come and say one is more important than the other. So the architect's job is to respond correctly. What is very important is to be no waste of material, because that's very important, the materials that you use, the climatic situations, that you have to have the correct way to deal with that specific climate of the place. So this whole thing of the intelligence is very important. How intelligently you can choose your approach, and approach is global, being choice of material, choice of techniques, and also teaching and daring to do new things, which is very important.
So if I look at all the projects that the Award for Architecture shortlists and awards to, there's such variation, such innovation, as you've just mentioned. Is there anything that you see that sort of is a thread that runs through them all?
hope, which I think it exists, is that what all of them they have in common is excellence in approach. You can't look at a project because sometimes the projects which are very excellent in their approach, they're not very photogenic, so the photos do not do justice to the project. No, architecture, it means doing something for the society. That's the most important thing. And so that's where we can look at the essence of the project, that approach, which is just how you get to that point, which is very important. All of them, they have that, it being a big project, as I said, or a very small project.
And could you give us some examples of what that approach might look like?
I'm just coming back from a ceremony, the Pritzker ceremony, which is an architecture award, which is, it was just created same time as the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, but it's given to an architect, right? So this time it was given to an architect, Francis Quéré, who had won an Aga Khan Award for Architecture in 2004 for a school when he was not known at all. And what he did was he went to his home country of Burkina Faso and he somehow adapted the technology that he had learned in Germany using the local material and teaching people how to build and coming with innovative. There were innovation, there was understanding of the place, and also how you become an agent for development. So this approach is very full and complete.
You mentioned the Pritzker Prize just now, and I'm sure there are others I don't know, I'm not an expert in the area, but how does the Award for Architecture distinguish itself from some of these other architectural awards?
First of all, we do not give an award to a person. This is very important because no project is a product of one person. It's always a client, the builders, the architect, the engineers. A lot of people have something to do in a project to become excellent. So we give an award to a project and not to a person. And this is very important. Second thing, we do research. This is a very big difference between all the other awards. We do thorough research on projects. And we're giving an award to a project which is completed and in use. It's just not an idea. We have to go and check it out. This whole thing of going and checking the projects, which we call it the on-site review, is very unique to the Aga Khan Award for Architecture.
Hazar Imam often talks to us about the value of pluralism and the importance of pluralism. Within the context of architecture and specifically the award, how does the selection process promote or think about pluralism?
Pluralism has got this whole notion of inclusiveness. And inclusive architecture is very important. It's architecture which keeps everyone in. There is a kind of bringing people together, bringing the whole problems together and solving them. Another thing about pluralism is that you are aware and happy to include others. Plurality is very important, even to explain, because people are not aware. You've got different people within the Jamaat, they're from different parts of the world. But because sometimes historically they didn't know each other, the existence, there was this whole thing. So Hazar Imam, as I remember correctly, he started talking about pluralism when Central Asia was open, etc. People had seen. And that, I think, is very important.
And I mean, sometimes I know that I struggle sometimes to sort of define or understand the concept of pluralism. And I'm wondering if through some examples of projects that have maybe won the award or been shortlisted to help understand the concept of pluralism.
Some of the most important ones are the social projects, where especially in the poor areas of the cities and countries, that when you can see that people of different ethnic, religious, faith, and when they are together, they live together, and that living together is a part of the pluralism. I can give you an example. For example, once we gave an award to a project which was in the betterment of a upgrading of a slum in Indonesia, and we have given to a number of slum upgrading program in Indonesia. But that was very specific because it was at the corner of the, in the part of the city which was seen. So there was a priest, a Catholic priest, who he brought together with people of different faiths, and brought in artists, from schools of arts, and they together made this whole area much better and acceptable to all. So instead of demolishing it, it was kept, and even the municipality let it be there because it became beautiful. And the whole thing is that different people live there together. These are where architecture pluralism has got. The other thing is by usage. The buildings are used by different people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if we look ahead out sort of, I mean, you've been directing now for 16 years or so, we said. If we look ahead to the next 16, for example, thinking about the value of pluralism, thinking about some of the other things you've highlighted around innovation, what do you see the future holding for this area?
Well, I'm not a fortune teller, but I do believe in people's capacity. And I think that is something which is very important. I learned a lot of that from His Highness, because I could see that in different places, in different situations, how he believed in people's capacity and gave them place to come with innovations, because this is very important, of understanding and including people and helping them to bring up the capacity which the hidden ones are within them. So this is, I think, it's quite important. And that's why I believe that in the future a lot of problems that we think is biggest problems today will be solved. But the problem we have is the speed of deterioration. What we're doing to our environment and nature, etc. These are very difficult to repair. But it will come, because we'll have new ways of doing things. And I do believe that science and people working together will do that, especially with the capacities coming up.
And you've had the opportunity to work quite closely with Hazar Imam at various points in your career. And have you got any lessons or any learnings from that exposure? Many,
I must say. But there's two things which I don't know, maybe that's my reading of it. He showed us the being visionary. And being visionary, there are two things which are not important for you. One is time, and sometimes even money. Because everything can be created, you can gain it, but you have to have the right vision and know where you're going. And that is very important, because he has always been looking beyond what others were supposed to do. So this was the big thing I saw him, because he was not seeing himself only achieving. It's like a president that wants to do everything in his term of the presidency. He doesn't have for me, he doesn't have a term of presidency. He's there, and he's there for the future. And he's shown that, I think. I'm looking at this amazing backdrop behind you of all these wonderful books and the art that we're surrounded by. Anything in your office that you'd like to share with us? One of the things with the Aga Khan Award for Architecture is His Highness has been his view, was wanted to make sure that everything is, for him, details are very important. The whole general thing is important, but details. So the first steering committee, they asked a wonderful artist, a German artist who lived in Iran, and he spoke fluent Farsi, and he was a specialist in Kufi calligraphy, to do the award's logo, which is this is, and it's the name of Allah 8 times reflected. Yeah. And he created the first this as a trophy. So here there's an interesting story I can add, is that in 1980, when His Highness has created the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, the first thing was that we're going to give 5 awards. So they asked Karl Schlamminger, the artist, to create this trophy. He had created the logo, but then to create this trophy for the 5 winners. And so he made them 5, and the jury met. And when the jury met, they said, well, the steering committee has said 5, but we don't believe that 5 projects can do all the projects. We're going to choose 15. So Hasanuddin Khan, who was then the convener of the award, he calls His Highness and he says, Your Highness, they're not listening. They're choosing 15 instead of 5. And he says, very good, give 15. So what happened is that when they made 15, so we didn't have 15 trophies. So they have to keep these for the Chairman's Award. And the Chairman's Award was given the first time to Hassan Fatih. He himself was a legendary at the time in architecture. So this is this trophy. I keep one in my office. I've got actually, if you can see, I've got the trophies of all the consecutive cycles. Each time the trophy comes, it's always the same thing. It's the award logo, which is Allah 8 times, but it's reflected. So this reflection within, it's a reflection within reflection in the crystal that you can see it. So it's a really beautiful piece. Karl Schlaminger, you might know the name, and actually the Jamaat know him very well, because he has got a number of pieces in many Jamaat Khanas and in many Ismaili centers, you know, in Lisbon, in London, in Toronto. So his work has been in many, many places.
That's good to know. He's contributed here as well.
His first project for His Highness was for the award and the award logo.
When the award was launched back in 1977, how was it received?
Those days, modernism was what was prevailing in the whole world in architecture. And people saw, not only people, but architects, professionals, architecture as a building, as a piece. And they were not looking at other aspects of architecture, the social aspects of it, the innovative parts of it. So when the first awards were given in 1980, and it was all over in journals and newspapers all over the world, we had projects like slum upgrading, projects like engineering, water towers in Kuwait, for example. We had restoration projects. And these, at the time, were not considered as architecture. And this was a kind of that in the field of architecture, the award broadened it, brought all these aspects of it to it. And also, as we give an award to a project and not to a person, is the contribution of different people, which we talked about it. And how, for example, the architect and a mason could be together. I've got one piece in my collection in my museum. Let me see if I can find it. It's here. This is a journal called Domus, which is a very design-oriented Italian journal. And you can see that there's a face of a mason, an Egyptian master mason, who was a winner of one of the first projects. I mean, he was with the architect. They came and received the award from His Highness in Lahore. He never had traveled out of Egypt in his life. And he became all of a sudden world famous, being on one of the most design magazines of the time. So this is very important, that how the award has broadened the concept of architecture in the reality. The other thing which people do today, it's very common. You talk about the social aspects of the architecture, how it has an impact on society. It was the Aga Khan Award for Architecture was pointing those out to the general public through the awards. And these are big contributions that His Highness's initiative has done in architecture.
Amazing. And this award, so you said the first award was in 1980. How did it influence then the development of the Aga Khan Trust for Culture going forward in the late 80s?
Well, I have to go back a little bit. When the award was created in 1977, the whole thing is that there was not much understanding of where the Muslim world is and what are the questions in architecture. So His Highness and the steering committee decided the first time to launch a series of seminars. And these seminars were happening in different parts of the world. So it was in Turkey, in Morocco. And then, for example, the first time, His Highness and steering committee and a lot of people went to China in that was a historic trip in architecture, knowing China, because in 1982, China was not open to the world. So these seminars and these trips, they ended up in a series of also publications. If you would go in 1980s, 70s, to the schools of architecture around the world, you would never difficultly find any book on architecture of other parts of the Muslim world. So by creating these publications, the proceedings of the seminars and also the award books, and they were all sent to all the universities around in the Muslim world. So we created a a source of knowledge which did not exist.
So there's a lot there in terms of the legacy of the award and sort of, you know, really capturing that best practice.
So one of the things is that, for example, in 1984, when there was this Aga Khan Award for Architecture seminar in Cairo. So His Highness wanted to leave a present to that city, which he's done that for the other places as well. And that's where the Al-Azhar Park project started. So in a way, the Aga Khan Award for Architecture has been a kind of a scout. It goes first. And when a notion is developed, it becomes a program of its own. So the Historic Cities program were first small projects which was administered by the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. Same thing with education. The Aga Khan program at Harvard and MIT was created because two people, the dean of the School of Architecture of MIT and Professor Grobar, who was at Harvard, they were members of the first steering committee. And they said education is important. So they created this, His Highness established the chairs at Harvard and MIT. Actually, it was the first time that the two universities were working together on the project. So there's a lot of innovations there.
Fantastic. So there's clearly a lot of legacy for the award. This year, Hazar Imam is celebrating 65 years of his imamate, and I'm wondering, from your perspective, his legacy in the architecture world.
I must say that what I've seen, which I've been witnessed in the past 40 years that we're working, and the 65 years of His Highness's imamate, that I don't think any other leader in the world has been able to leave such a legacy. Legacy is not only the buildings. It's not, you know, you've got the biggest hospital in Karachi, or you've got how many schools built, etc. Those are built, those are material. What is important that he's helped the Jamaat to have this educated Jamaat who has elevated all of them, millions in different parts of the world at the same time. No other person has been able to have such a legacy. And this is because he believes in the capacity of people. And that's how he has encouraged them to become better, by learning, by doing volunteer work, by giving time. And I think this is the most important thing, is the people that he's left is going to be there, and he's done for them.
And day to day with the award, I mean, the cycle, the research you mentioned earlier on the projects, and then shortlisting, etc. How involved is Hazar Imam in that process?
Well, in 1977-78, that was the beginning of the award. He was present every 2 months, if not every month, on all the committee meetings, personally sitting days and days. Well, once the award was established, it was becoming, maybe less, not every 2 months, but we have got a series of steering committee reports, steering committee meetings, which His Highness is the chairman. He's the chairman. The steering committee changes every 3 years. And during these meetings, for the 2 days of the meetings, he is there and he's present. Hazar Imam has got the saying, whenever he talks about architecture, first he starts saying, I'm not an architect. Then when he says, but, that's the whole thing starts, because he knows so well. He can read all the drawings, he can see the projects, he can go through the project all the way. And his passion for architecture, which has been with him, and you can see in his different interviews and what is written about how much he likes architecture. So he was very, very involved. And I think he does, I'm a witness of how he enjoys being with the steering committee members. And because he plays the role as not only as chairman, as a member. So he never imposes anything. He always asks questions, and he will make sure that what it comes is the decision of a committee, and it's not a decision by him.
If I may, I'd like to ask a little bit more about your working relationship with Hazar Imam. You've been working closely with this award and with him. Do you have any kind of, anecdotes or stories to share from your working?
I've been privileged all these years, and there are moments which are very interesting. For example, one of the things is the award ceremonies. The award ceremonies are every 3 years, that you have got the in the presence of the presidents and the kings and the highest person in that country, in the host country. It changes every year, so the awards have been trying to go to different parts of the world. In the very early days, it was very important to be in one of the most important architectural monuments of the Islamic world. The first time it was in Lahore, in the Shalimar Gardens, and then we were at Humayun's tomb. Topkapi Palace was opened for the first time to the public event for the award in 1983. So these are important moments, and especially the presence of the heads of states. When you go to a country and the head of state comes and His Highness is received as head of state, the whole media in that country talked about architecture, a subject which they usually don't do. We have got sometimes 200, 250 international guests. And from the very beginning, His Highness decided to have always all the presidents of the councils, the whole LIF, to be present. Why? Because he wanted them to be the representatives of the Jamaat, to come and see the importance and go back and report to the Jamaat each time. So this relation was very important.
Thank you so much, Farrokh, for this conversation. I've learnt so much, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about how the shortlisted projects get evaluated over the next few months. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.